Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, February 2nd, 2006. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. But usually I say we're all about making beer at home, but this week we're going to deviate a little bit and steer our attention to a noble ancestor of beer, mead. We'll talk to David Myers, chairman of the mead for Redstone Meadery, about the upcoming International Mead Festival and about mead in general. We'll even get some tips on making our own. Well, if you remember last week, George in Erie, Colorado asked for some advice on how to keep his beer warm in the fermenter during the chilly Colorado winters. Well, since I live in Arkansas and our winters are generally mild, this one more than most, I asked for some help from you, the listeners, and we got some great responses. Jerry in Tallahassee, Florida, uses a twist on a tip that we've heard in the past, connected with cooling fermenters during lagering. Jerry says he ferments in a chest freezer, and when he needs to raise the temperature in the winter when fermenting ales, he uses old plastic milk jugs with hot or warm water. This is similar to using frozen jugs to make lagers, a tip that we've heard a few times here on the podcast. Drew from Elk Ridge, Maryland, says he uses a firm wrap to heat his carboy. Drew says the firm wrap is a 40-watt heating sheet where you can tape the firm wrap to the fermenter. He says, I used it to brew a saison where I wanted the fermentation temperatures up around 90 degrees. Drew says, I know 90 sounds high, but the saison yeast, WLP 565, loves it warm. The firm wrap is able to raise the temperature 20 degrees. He says you can only tape a portion of the wrap to get a lower temperature rise if you want. Jared in Brampton, Ontario had this tip. He says, I currently use a very simple solution, a somewhat shallow platform with a ceramic tile on the top and a light bulb underneath the tile, essentially a warming plate. Jared says, I figured that the ceramic tile was safer in terms of excess heat, but that doesn't seem to be a problem. He says, I have an aquarium sticker on the side of my carboy so I can monitor the temperature. And Jared says, you can adjust the effective temperature by using different-sized light bulbs or by putting a box over the carboy. And I suggested to Jared that he might be able to hook up a dimmer to the light bulb to get even more control, and he seemed to like that idea. Greg writes in from Wilmington, North Carolina, and says, I have a spare room in my house where I put my fermenting bucket, and I quickly realized that it was too cold to keep the process going. I put an electric radiator-style space heater in the room about 5 feet from the bucket and turned it on about 25% and kept the door open so it wouldn't overheat the room. Greg says, I checked the temperature about every hour and tweaked it until I got it just where I wanted. And Greg finishes by saying, I had a crystal thermometer on the outside of the bucket, so I saw that it was the right temperature. Well, good advice all around. And also on the subject of brewing equipment, Matt from Bedford, United Kingdom, writes, just listening to the recent podcast and heard about the guy who got a fridge from his in-laws. Matt says, another suggestion for obtaining brewing equipment is freecycle.org. That's FREECYCLE.org. Matt says it's a worldwide organization where people recycle things they want to get rid of, basically a big swap shop. Matt says, I just got hold of a fridge for lagering for free. It's also great for getting empty beer bottles, Matt says. Well, that sounds like a deal. Thanks for everyone who has written in with their tips, and I hope George and the others in colder climates can get some good use out of them. And I'll post a link to all the websites that we'll talk about during this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. A couple of bits of news in the podcast world. A new episode of Basic Brewing Video is online this week. In this week's episode, Steve Wilkes and I bottle our six-pack IPA. Steve and I recorded a guest appearance for BigFoamyHead.com right before we bottled, and Rick from Big Foamy Head bet us that we wouldn't get a full six-pack of beer out of the batch. So he bet some homebrew, and you'll have to tune in to see who won that bet and who's going to get some homebrew. Also, there's a new home for Basic Brewing Video. You can find it at basicbrewingvideo.com, and special thanks to our web guru, Kelly Dodson, for help with the web design and implementation. And speaking along the lines of experimenting with small batches of beer, our friend Johan from Sweden has brewed a small batch of beer, 4.5 liters, using all grain. And Johan has posted a webpage with details of his experiment, and you can find a link to that page on basicbrewingradio.com. Thanks to Johan for sending that along and for his continued support of the podcast. Also on the podcasting front, you might remember Brian Ellis from the KGB. That's the Kirkendall Grand Brewers, a homebrewing club based in Houston, Texas. Brian and the KGB have launched a monthly show, soon to be a podcast, he says, on homebrewing. And I'll post a link to that show on the site as well. And best of luck to Brian and all of his crew. Well, now on to our interview with David Myers of Redstone Meadery. The International Mead Festival is coming up in Boulder, Colorado on February 10th and 11th. We took this opportunity to talk to David about the festival and about mead in general.
On your business card, it says Chairman of the Mead for Redstone Meadery. What does that entail?
Well, at the beginning, it entailed everything. I was employee number one and did all the tasks, and then over time we've been fortunate enough to grow. But Chairman of the Mead actually comes from one of our product lines. Our Mountain Honey Wine has all of our artwork is all unique, one-of-a-kind pieces done by a very good friend of mine who's done all of our imagery. And the title of the painting for those lines is actually called Chairman of the Mead. And if anybody's actually seen our bottles, everything's very music-themed, and so it's basically a party going on, and I'm the guy in the chair. So I wound up taking on the title of Chairman of the Mead through that, and it's been fun ever since.
Now, are you an administrator, or are you the mead maker, or what do you do?
Well, nowadays I am more national marketing and sales, getting distributors. We are in 16 states at this point. But in the beginning, as I said, I did everything. I made the mead, I picked up the phone, I put stuff in the mail, I went out and made sales calls, I delivered, I cleaned the tap lines for our draft products. I started with all of it because I'm a home brewer, and that's where it all kind of got started for me. And as we've grown, I've kind of taken on more administrative and marketing and the face of the meadery, and I've really turned it over to really qualified people to be making the mead, and we're very happy to have good mead maker in Mason Thomas, and just out having fun.
But you're the kind of boss that you can't BS because you've done it all and you know what they're talking about.
I do manage to follow along, and it's always good to be able to know you can always put the boots back on, and all the recipes are still my original home brews and such. So it's always a lot of fun to be tasting the mead, and as other people make it, it takes on other nuances, and that's very interesting to see as well.
So we say that here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about homebrewing beer. So were you a beer home brewer as well as a mead maker?
Yeah, and it actually was. I started by making beer. I mean, I started making beer in 1989. Long before there was a whole lot of information, or Charlie Papazian's book. I don't think I'm not sure if Joy of Homebrewing. It had to have been out in its first edition by then. But I was buying homebrew supplies out of the back of some old timer's house here in Boulder, and Colonel John was always great because the answer to any question was, "Hey Colonel, I want to make a brown ale. What kind of hops?" And the answer was always along, "Well, you can use anything you want to use. It just depends what you like." And as a young homebrewer, I didn't really find that to be
useful,
very helpful in trying to learn things. But as I've been homebrewing a long time and then into the business, and then people ask me about what they should do with their meads and such, it's amazing how quickly I've learned to get to, well, it all depends what you like. You can use any kind of honey or yeast that you want. So, clearly the Colonel had wisdom beyond my youth that I could understand, and it's all come full circle over time. But, I was making beer and enjoying that, and I was actually, my first mead, I was actually over at Charlie Papazian's home. Our local homebrew club here, the Hop, Barley, and the Ailers, we were both members of, and Charlie had put up for auction for our fundraiser pairs of tickets to go taste beer at his house. And I clearly had to do that.
Oh yeah.
And we were over there, and we finished the beer, and right at the end, Charlie was like, you all want to try something really special? And he pulled out one of his prickly pear meads, and it was love. And I was already brewing beer. I had all the equipment. I felt I got to start making me some of this. And through the experience of tasting meads of his, and then Paul Gatzer, who's the director of the Brewers Association and the former director of the American Homebrewers Association, I tasted some of his mead, and I just got inspired to make mead. And I made mead and made some mead and made up some more mead. And one day I had like 30 carboys of mead going in my basement, and it was like, hey, I should do this for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And Redstone is really kind of the basement come alive.
Now, every home brewer or every brewer that really gets into it thinks, if I could do this for a living.
Well, yeah. And you can.
Yeah. What were the challenges in getting Redstone set up? And
well, certainly still challenges. They haven't gone away yet. Across the board, there are always new challenges every day, and that's definitely comes from fortunate enough to have success and be moving forward. As a guy who was what I always said kind of a hack of a home brewer, the real challenges initially was I'd been brewing beer and mead for, God, it must have been 11 years before I was bringing Redstone online. But I was never into the science of doing it. I just, like to make beer, and, I started making beer, at a time in 89, 90, where in most parts of the country, there wasn't the kind of craft selection there is today at, fairly reasonable prices. That wasn't really there. And so I started brewing because I could brew better, stronger, cheaper.
Yeah.
And I kind of stopped using the hydrometer after, like, the third time, and, I didn't care. Because all I was doing, hey, I make beer that I like, it tastes good, and I know it's got alcohol. That was kind of the working theory. So after 11 years of doing that, I actually had to learn the science of brewing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it'd be funny because I had a good friend who's a wonderful brewmaster consulting with me because I'd never been in the commercial business before. And so he helped me select the equipment, get things set up, and basically trained me on my own equipment. It was just trying to figure out all these little nuances of, that worked in the basement, but oh boy, that doesn't work here in the commercial, and this works fine. And then I refer to it as, we would go along fine just like out of the basement, and then we'd slam into a brick wall, and I would try to climb over it, dig under it, chew through it, get around it, figure it out, boom, get back on the track and go for a while and slam into another brick wall and go, okay, that doesn't work in the commercial setting, and change these little things and tweak it. But I was always trying to keep it very, very true to the basement, as it were, in terms of really making sure the quality of the product was always sustained all the way out. So that was an interesting challenge, for me as a home brewer. One of the funny things that, great story is, I brewed my first batch ever. It was middle of the winter, and I was really concerned that the coolant system, which I thought was going to be the weakest link of the equipment I bought, was, I was worried about it failing, and the temperature would ferment too high, and we'd get upper ethanols and have to wait through all those kind of, jet fuel flavors for it to mellow back out, and that was my biggest concern. What had never occurred to me was, in the middle of the winter, with the heat turned down in my warehouse overnight to conserve money, that it wasn't going to get too warm. It was going to be kind of chilly. And so I was trying to get a fermentation temperature of like 79, and I was all worried it was going to go like to 85 or 88 or whatever. And I came in, and it was at 65.
Ah.
And it was like, didn't think of that. And I was like, but, I was a home brewer. And so as a home brewer, I was like, well, what would I do if I had a cold carboy that I needed warmer? I was like, I'd put a heat belt on it. It's like, well, the heat belt like in that's not, it's too small. And what else is kind of like I'm like, electric blanket's kind of like a heat belt. And bungee cords would, and, in the boots and wet from cleaning, middle of the winter, off to Target we go. And I'm looking for electric blend. I'm like, oh, let's see, king size. I came back and I wrapped it up and plugged it in, and by the time I came in the next day, it was into the low 70s. And so for the longest time, we used to keep our small fermenters wrapped in electric blankets, and I'd always tell people they're not scared, they're just cold. So it was those kinds of funny little things you learn that with no commercial experience. I really had no idea what I was doing.
So this is an occasion where someone with more commercial experience might have thrown up their hands, but you saw it as an opportunity.
Absolutely. It was really just finding our way, and it was trying, and it was fun, and it was trying, and it was fun, and I wouldn't have changed anything.
Now, homebrewers are some of the most resourceful people, that I know. Every time I throw a question out on the show, what's your solution to this problem? All these answers come back that I never would have thought of.
Well, I would think, especially with homebrewers, you ask 10 homebrewers the same question, you'll get about 14 answers.
Yeah. Now, as a homebrewer, I've heard it said that, it's pretty easy to make a good beer, but to make that same beer twice, that's, where the challenge is. Is it the same way with the large-scale commercial mead making?
Well, certainly, to an extent. I mean, I think a lot of things, especially on commercial levels, just like, commercial beer, brewing and such, that, depending what you're trying to do, I think, having the commercial equipment allows you to dial in and be, really have an idea of where you're at. We have we have three distinct product lines, but our two main ones are nectars, 8% carbonated. They're made fast, quick. They're meant to be enjoyed young and fresh.
Now, what is a nectar? Explain. Pause along the way. Remember, we're not fluent in the words of mead.
But, well, nectar, like all product lines, we have made up product line names. So nectar stems from mead always being has traditionally been known as nectar of the gods. Mm-hmm. And so nectar is a product line for us.
So it's not a category of mead that everyone would recognize.
Nah,
okay.
Strictly made up.
Marketing.
Strictly made up. And for us, nectar is 8% alcohol and carbonated, and then we have different flavors inside that line. Our second line is called Mountain Honey Wines, and they're all going to be 12% alcohol and non-carbonated. And so, and they're all mead, it's just different reference points to call different style, very distinctly different styles. And in the Mountain Honey Wine, we have up to 7 going at any one time.
Wow.
Kind of thing. And so we try to, mead is the oldest beverage no one's ever heard of. And so a lot of our work to the masses is education. Mm-hmm. They have a conception of mead that is very singular. They think of it as a big, sweet dessert wine type of product that you'd only want small amounts of. And where I've had wonderful, big, sweet dessert style meads, and there's nothing wrong with those kinds of meads. Mead is a wildly diverse beverage category. I tell people if grape wine was a category, it would be a huge category. Well, mead is the same way. And so it can be high in alcohol, low in alcohol. It can be sparkling or still. It can be dry or it can be sweet. It can have fruits. It can have spices. And just like different grapes make different grape wines, different honeys make different honey wines. So the range is very, very large. And I think that's one of the education pieces that we have to work with people on. And that's why our company actually, created 3 distinct product lines, because those 8% nectars don't taste anything like those 12% Mountain Honey Wines, and even the Mountain Honey Wines in and amongst themselves taste very different. But yet we can say to everybody, but it's all mead. Mm-hmm. And that's where the real challenge is in our industry.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to attend your mead tasting at the Great American Beer Festival.
Yeah, that's a fun one, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. And, going from table to table, you didn't know what to expect, or I didn't know what to expect. I liked everything. but there were even a mead or two that were mixed with grape wines, or it seems like, and it seems like the mead and the honey are so flexible, that you could use it in just about any way that you wanted to.
Right, and it's really, it's not just about dessert wines. It's also about, dinner wines and, meads for the bar. Our nectar products we do into cocktail mixes. And it's been really fun because with a lot of pride, I say that Redstone Meadery is one of the real drum beaters for the mead industry. I'm a real rising tide floats all boats kind of guy. And right now I believe we need more meaderies making quality mead throughout the country so as to grow, the actual category. Because mead is a very tiny segment right now, but I think it's a tiny segment back to, it's the oldest beverage no one's ever heard of, so it's kind of tough to sell. What
kind of reach do you have? I mean, how far do you get out there in the marketplace? What is your market share?
That's one of the things as someone very dedicated to the mead industry, we're still trying to determine that, not just for Redstone, but one of the things myself and Julia Hers, who has a company called honeywine.com, and I definitely recommend for your listeners, 3 great websites to go get mead information: honeywine.com, gotmead.com, and aboutmead.com. Great research areas. But Julia and I have actually founded the International Mead Association, and we are working on trying to get the meaderies to, we need to get a similar message. We need to work together. We need to talk each other up. We need to, keep building this industry right now. I don't really think of anybody as a competitor. I think of them, as brothers in arms, kind of thing, because we all are trying to create a revolution. And that'll be one of the things, for your listeners is it's all about ask for mead, because if you're not asking, they're not getting it. Mm-hmm. And it's very, something that, we look at it as a revolution. And in the revolution, you get people a few at a time, and you get them to go get some people, and you get them to get a few more people, and, it has to spread. And we're really trying to make mead into a very recognized category.
And it seems like to me that once you've tried mead, you want to try some more mead.
Absolutely.
And different brands, different kinds.
And that's one of the things, exactly. I mean, I always, tell people, for us, they got to try it to buy it if they haven't had it before. And it's not just our mead, it's other meads. It's tough to get things into consumers' hands, but yes, once you begin to try things, you really, it's like, wow, this is good. What other kinds of meads? I mean, it's like, it's like enjoying Cabernets. You're not just going to get one and only drink that one. If you like Cabernets, you're going to look for other Cabernets to drink. If you like, if you like pale ales, you're going to look for other pale ales or other stouts or whatever it is you like to drink. Those are the things you're going to explore from company to company to company, and mead is no different. That roots party is, that's always a lot of fun. We call it a get back to your roots party, because since we throw it at the Great American Beer Festival, and we, of course, are getting all the brewers and that kind of thing attending, we try to remind them where they came from, since mead is the original alcohol. So that's how we kind of came up with our Get Back to Your Roots. But a lot of the meads there, of course, they're all of our product line there, but we had meads that were from the International Mead Festival. And this is an event that's coming up on February 10th and 11th of this year, and it is the largest commercial mead competition anywhere in the world. And a lot of the meads you had that day were all from that event, and we're obviously 2 weeks out from doing this event again this year. And this year we have 96 meads registered from around the world.
Wow!
And once again, many of them not available in the United States. So it's the only place. I guess unless you get an invitation to our Roots Party, that you can taste these products. Occasionally, I'm seen throughout the country doing mead education nights, so there are a few extra chances, but you have to catch me when you can.
Now, of those 96 meads, will attendees to the festival, will they be able to taste all of those?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, probably they would need 2 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly 3, but we only have 2 sessions. But yes, they will all be available for sampling to the public. Anything that is competing then needs to be on the floor.
Wow.
So it's really exciting. We have meads and people coming. I mean, this is what's really so exciting. I mean, we have mead this year coming from South Africa, and the mead makers coming to pour his mead. We have our second Australian meadery entering this year, and those folks are coming to the festival to pour their meads. We have a gentleman, actually a couple groups coming from Poland who are pouring their meads. We got folks coming down from Canada to pour their meads. So it's not just an opportunity to taste the meads. I believe it's something like 2/3 of our companies that are participating will be behind the table pouring their mead. So it's usually the mead makers. Occasionally it's just representatives of the company. But it's a great chance. It's not just about trying all these meads. It's that you get to talk to the people who are making them and selling them and have intimate knowledge with them.
So if you're a home brewer and you're interested in making meads and you taste something wonderful there you got the expert to talk to give you some hints. You know, if it's not available in your area, you got to make it.
And it's great stories. I mean, you know, we're a creative lot. Also with the competition this year, and of course it'll be too late for your listeners to enter this year, but if they are mead makers, they want to think about it for next year, is this year we actually added an homebrewing side to the Mead Festival.
Oh.
So for the first time it is both amateur and commercial. Obviously the amateurs judge only. But we, in our first year, this was great. I mean, we were just so pleased with the results, and people were so excited. 212 entries in our first year for the homebrew side.
Wow.
So with the 212 and the 96, we, as of record, we believe are the largest mead competition in the world this year.
Wow! Congratulations.
We felt great about it. I mean, when we started, we know homebrewing, it takes a little time to build up a competition, and to get that kind of a turnout on our first year actually frightens us for next year, because because then you have to judge 212 meads.
Yeah.
So, but we actually did it in one seating just last Saturday. We got through 212 entries, got judged last week.
Wow.
And then what's very fun with the homebrewer side of it is the final round, which will be judged on site at the International Mead Festival, is mostly going to be commercial mead makers will be deciding the final round. And that's something very unique we have to offer in our homebrew mead competition, to be able to offer a commercial panel for the final round.
Yeah, if you guys will help me remember for next year, I can tell our homebrewers who are listening ahead of time, so that maybe they can help swamp you with entries for next year.
Right, absolutely. We'll make sure we get everything linked up for next year to announce when we do call for entries.
Now, along with the tasting, you've also got seminars.
Yes, we
with
do.
some notable folks giving presentations.
We do. We have 4 wonderful seminars, starting especially for the homebrew world. Ken Schramm, who is the author of The Complete Mead Maker, is actually going to be doing kind of an advanced melomel seminar. And for those who know Ken, either by his book or as the organizer of the Mazer Cup for many years, or if you've ever had the pleasure, as I have, to have tasted Ken's meads before, right there you already know that this seminar is going to be well worth attending. We also have the gentleman who comes down from Intermeal, and I'm probably butchering the name of his company, but it's in Quebec, who will be discussing just basics of quality mead making. His company last year actually swept the melomel category, and also took the gold 2 years running with his black currant mead. And again, if people have been out to the festival and tasted this is a wonderful mead. He actually inspired me last year with his sweep of the category. I came home determined to make something, not to let him do that again. So we'll see how we did here soon. And then on our other 2 seminars is actually, I had mentioned the gentleman from South Africa who's coming out, and he is a doctor of biology, and so he's going to do a seminar first, and then Dr. Chris White from White Labs is going to do a mead yeast seminar.
And those are split up on each of the 2 days.
Yeah, it's basically
2 per day.
2 on each day. I don't actually. If you go to the website meadfest.com,
and I'll put a link on our site as well.
Right, it has all the information in terms of who's speaking on which night. The seminars are part of the ticket price. It is a bargain. At $29 advance gets tasting glass and program and entry to seminars, and of course there are the 96 meads and such. And
those.
And it's held at a hotel, and we try to keep it all kind of we try to keep amongst ourselves in terms of we book out the whole hotel, and people can get great discount rooms, and they can go through the website and find all the hotel info. So it's come on out. It's fun.
Well, I wish I could come out, and I'm arranging for someone to come out there in my stead, as a stringer, so that we can get some coverage. So hopefully that will work out. Now, I can't let you get off the phone without getting some practical advice for our home brewers and our mead makers. And I'll share I make one mead recipe. And I'm pretty much stuck on that because I like it, and that's what.
You see, right, and you shouldn't stop making it. You should just add more to, just make more meat.
Well, you're right. But my recipe, are you ready? You might want to get a pencil to write this down.
And, there's going to be a quiz afterwards?
I take 10 or 12 pounds of honey, 5 gallons of water, some champagne yeast, and some yeast nutrient. That's it.
What kind of honey are you using?
Well, I've been using local honey from a farmer. It's not, he's just out on the farm, so it's not any kind of a varietal. But I prime the bottles so it comes out sparkling and clear and crisp and clean and a whole lot like champagne. So very dry and simple.
What are you priming the bottles with?
Just 3/4 of a cup, just like a beer, 3/4 of a cup of corn sugar per 5 gallons, and that's it.
Right.
It's the world's most simple mead.
And it sounds like a nice mead, and there's a great example of that kind of a mead. The honey you use is going to be very important.
Sure.
Because it's going to be your flavors coming basically from the honey and the champagne yeast, and so if you use a more neutral honey like a clover, and clover honey is great for lots of things, but I don't think it makes for a great traditional mead, just because it's kind of neutral, so you don't get a lot of flavors. So there's there's an example of you want real flavorful honeys. Things that I like to do, and we do this at Redstone, is I like using more than one kind of honey in every mead I make. I just find that the melding of two flavors into one flavor provides a true uniqueness and a depth that I think is very difficult to achieve in just single varietal honeys. And that's something that, it doesn't have to be a lot of a second honey. It can be 10, 20, I'd say at least 20% of a secondary honey, just because, and that's a personal thing with me. I do that with, coffees, olive oils, any number of things that I like to consume.
You're a meddler.
I like melding of flavors and finding my own flavor based on taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Now, are there varieties of honey that you don't want to use, or pretty much is it if you like the taste of the honey in its raw form, it's good?
It all depends what you like. You can use any kind of honey with any kind of mead.
That sounds familiar. I've heard that somewhere before.
But that is really what it is in the end, and it's amazing. Even just changing the mixture slightly or flip flopping them. To take six parts one honey, 3 parts another, and then do a flip-flop of the two, and it'll be an amazing difference in the flavor profiles. And then just like beers, different yeasts are going to give you different flavors, and, well, oddly enough, it all depends what you like. But, those kinds of things. But, that's, obviously what you have there is a good basic 12% alcohol or so mead recipe.
Now, to get a sweeter mead, do you stop the fermentation partway through the process, or do you rely on the yeast profile to give you that sweetness?
We actually on a commercial, and this is where there are going to be some differences in the commercial and the home brewing, and what I would do myself if I was throwing a homebrew batch would still be different. Commercially, we need to we got to control some things. We can't just send the bottles out and hope someone opens them before they blow up out on the shelf. So we wind up having to do more controlling of our meads. We do actually stop them on the way down. As a home brewer, as a general of thumb, I just say let her go. Patience is the thing you need the most as a home brewer.
I would agree with that.
So
especially
even
with
on
meads.
Your basic mead recipe, I'd encourage you on, maybe split it on one of the times and throw a little bit of fruit in. Do everything the same. I'll tell you the way you're going with that champagne, a little bit of raspberry, raspberries added to it. Maybe not even a lot of it. Could make for a really nice combination.
So how much for a 5-gallon batch if I were going to put raspberries in there?
I mean, if you want a raspberry mead where raspberry is your dominant flavor and you're using fresh, probably about 5 to 7 pounds for that size. If you're wanting to have some raspberry character but not necessarily have raspberries be the dominant, then you could be a lot more in the 2 to 3 pound.
And do you do that in the secondary, and do you pasteurize? Get us into details here, David.
Well,
Help us out.
It's funny because, of course, it really comes back to, if you ask 10 mead makers when they put the fruit in, you'll get 11 answers. Personally, I was a lazy home brewer, and so I liked adding my fruit and my spices into secondary. So if I was doing your mead, I'm going to guess that it's going to ferment. Primary is going to be 3 to 4 months, give or take. And as it's slowing down, but still active, I would then rack it onto the raspberries. And the reason I'm doing it now is by having the alcohol in the mead already. Now I'm not worried about like pasteurizing my fruit or having to affect my fruit.
So you don't pasteurize at all.
Right. So what I would do there is if I got using raspberries as the example, I'd buy them at the store. I'd bring them home. I'd wash them off. I'd shove them into the carboy and I'd rack the mead onto them. And I wouldn't do anything else.
Well, that sounds easy.
Well, or lazy. I mean, one of the two. But I was looking for I didn't want to affect any more fruit flavors. I believe in pasteurization because we don't add sulfites to any of our products. So we pasteurize our honey, and I pasteurize. That's right out of the basement. I pasteurized my meads at home too, and that's the balance of I got to heat it up some because I got to make sure there's no wild yeast or anything else that's going to give me problems. But I don't want to boil it or have a hot break because that's going to work against the aromatics of the honey. It's going to play against the flavor profiles of the honey. And some people boil and do hot breaks and skim, or in the commercial world there's something called ultrafiltration, which is essentially filtering the honey into the mixing pot. So they're stripping some things out of it. Some people use sulfites, and I've had good mead made all three ways. Personally, I don't want to add sulfites, and I'm a big believer in the pasteurization process. But that's just me. I've had great mead made the other two ways as well.
So would you mix the honey in with the water and bring it up to what, or would you?
No, actually we do. It's kind of it's the opposite way. We heat the water, and this is again I did this both at home and then carried it over to the commercial side. You heat the water. At home, probably 170, 180 degrees. We do 180 here at the meadery. And then I like to heat my honey up separately while it's still in its tubs and stuff. And you can do this as simple as a little bit in the microwave, or you can put it into a hot bath and let it heat up like that some. But I want the honey to have some temperature to it as well. At least 60 or 70 degrees. And then you got your water. You dump it into your 180 degree water. You want to make sure you take it off the heat first, so you don't get any burning on the bottom, and you'll basically stir vigorously as you're dumping your honey in off heat. And if things go really well, and it's kind of like your own thing. You got to learn your own temperatures, but get your water to whatever level you need to. So when you add your honey and stir it in without ever having to turn the heat on again, it's going to be between like 150 and 160.
Okay.
And at home, I would only hold it there for 20 minutes. We do it for 30 minutes in the meadery, but again, we can't have things launching off shelves or anything weird happening like that. But, it's just, so you'll have to dial in your own system to figure out. But it's basically you don't want to turn the heat on again. You just want to stir it in, let it go, 20 minutes, chill it off with the wort chiller, and get your yeast added in as you transfer in.
Now, I've never heated my honey. And in fact, the last batch of mead that I did, I just mixed. I had a carboy, a 5-gallon carboy of mineral water, and I mixed in the honey just cold, and pitched the yeast and aerated, and off it went. Was I just lucky or stupid or what? I mean, it came out great.
I don't know if I know you well enough, but no, it's I don't think no. I think there's a lot of articles that I've seen out there that where we talk about just the cold water mix-in and the whole heating thing is not necessary, and I think there's certainly credence to it. I think more than anything, it's what you personally are satisfied by doing and the results you get.
Kind of a level of comfort.
Right, and it's kind of what I said before with the whole, I've had good mead made many kinds of ways. So in no sense, I've never believed, oh, I'm making it right and they're making it wrong. I believe, well, this is how I like to make it, and it gives me the end product I'm happy with.
I guess the proof of the mead is in the tasting. If it tastes good and it's shelf stable, it doesn't blow up. Right. I guess you did it right that time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, what about spices? You said you added your fruit and spices in the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, we do a couple spiced meads at Redstone, and these are, again, all of our meads, for the most part, just about all of them, are old homebrew recipes of mine that I just altered. Mostly, I made them a little lighter in body and such for a more wider appeal. Kind of thing, and as I learned more about mead, I learned to make varying kinds of meads. But the two that have carried over from my homebrew days is actually the second mead I ever made, which was a juniper berry mead, and then I think it was like the fourth mead I ever made, which became a long-standing tradition for myself, and now is a tradition for our company, is for the winter solstice, a vanilla bean cinnamon stick mead.
Ooh.
And so, both are, from early batches of mine. And, that's just, all part of they're great flavor profiles. And, you can throw anything in a mead. I mean, I once made a roasted garlic mead.
Ooh.
It tasted like garlic.
Yeah, well, if you like garlic, I guess.
Yeah, I entered it into a homebrew competition, because it went into melomel, since that's fruit and vegetable. And I was hoping I would be served early in the round, so I'd just trash all the pallets and everything else would taste like garlic after that. I didn't win anything, but it was the talk of the competition.
Trying to sabotage.
I was curious, and I wish I had been there. So, talking about unusual meads, one of the funnest meads I ever had, homebrew, that was interesting and good, was a red bell pepper mead.
Oh.
And all the guy did was, he went to the supermarket, bought red bell peppers, washed them off, cut them up, and throw them in the secondary. And it was fabulous. It was fabulous.
I'll be darned.
Across the board, and it just goes to show you can put anything in there. And that's the beautiful thing about mead. That's why I really like mead. Is mead is. Well, I mean, I'm of the belief that it must be the easiest thing to make because I make it. But it's, it is that wide diversity. It is, especially as a home brewer, what was so nice is, if you don't like what you got, you can change it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really do that much with a beer, or if you're, making one, doing one of those wine kits or something. You don't have as much of those options. But a mead, if it's too dry, add some honey into it. If it's too sweet, get some yeast going and restart it. If there's something a little off in it, throw a whole bunch of fruit. It's a melomel. And, and that's, you can, you're not stuck with what you got, but you need to be patient to let what you got truly show itself. I mean, mediocre meads can become good meads. Mediocre meads can't become great meads over aging, but mediocre can become good just by, letting it sit in the cabinet and letting it age out. A lot of people get all freaked because, they probably had fermentation temperatures too high, and they get these upper ethanols, and, that's the rocket fuel kind of taste. And though that's not an ideal thing to go for, it doesn't mean that you're stuck with that flavor. It just means you're probably at least stuck with it for a while. And if you give it a year or 4, I mean, it kind of depends what it tastes like. A lot of times stuff will still kind of come around if you're patient. But, when we, good example still, the home brewer guy trying to become the commercial guy in my stories was, we made our nectar products first, and we had a couple of them, and then it became time to make the 12% alcohol line and start debuting that. And I was at that point, I had one, actually, Julia Hers, who I'd mentioned before from honeywine.com, joined me as my first employee and very just right arm was for those early years was, I was like, well, what should I make? And she's like, oh, you got to make a traditional. That traditional's the benchmark. It's the purest form. You have to, it's got to be a traditional. And I'm just like, well, that's the hardest thing to make because there's nowhere to hide. Making Pilsner, it's great if you hit it, but not so good if you miss. Kind of thing. And I was like, well, let me think about it. And I came in the next morning and I was like, I had the home brewer's mentality. I'm like, yep, I'm going to make the traditional. Something wrong with it? It's going to be a melomel. And it always, fortunately, stayed a traditional. But it really was. It was that's how it all was and started, and that's what we did.
Now that you mentioned patience, now if you're a home brewer, it may be a good thing to have several carboys of meads going at once because, to really, from start to finish, to really get a good mead, it may take a year or maybe more before you really start enjoying it.
Making a big dessert mead, I mean a real good giant, 14, 15, 16. I've had some home brewers that, it was like year 4 or 5 before they really hit their prime, kind of thing. And that's, I made a decision, probably like 2 or 3 years into after I started making mead was, the problem with mead was it took so long to make. And you had to be really patient that every bottle you opened felt like it had to be a special occasion. Every mead is sacred, kind of thing. And, and so I was like, I want to drink mead. I don't want to just feel like every bottle has to be a special occasion and we're just going to have a little amount or this kind of thing. I wanted mead around to be drinking. So I kind of set out over a period of a few years to make a ridiculous amount of mead. That way, suddenly as those came mature, I would now have mead. It would be there, different flavors, different kinds, drier, sweeter, mediums, fruited, traditional, spice, and very, very set out. And so the first year I started and I made probably 30 gallons that year. And the second year I had set out to make 60, and I wound up accidentally making 90. So that was a good year. Good year. And then the following year it was probably 60 again, 70. And and after that it kind of started maintaining more like a, just 40, 50 gallons a year kind of thing. And suddenly, 2, 3 years went by, I had some mead.
Had a lot of it.
And that was, if you want to have mead, you got to commit for a few years just to get, because once you get your stock up, it's not like you're blowing through it so fast that you can't keep your stock up. Mm-hmm. It's just that first, you got to get over the first hump.
And I figured out after my first few batches I bottled in champagne bottles, the big honking champagne bottles. But then I figured out, then that was really painful to open one of those.
Right, you really had to be.
Because that's a whole lot of mead. But if you bottled them in 12-ounce beer bottles, then that, you can get 3 champagne flutes out of one 12-ounce beer bottle.
Right. Mead made me come back to bottling because, like any good home brewer, I washed my first keg for some beer, and I had never bottled a beer again. But mead had brought me back to bottles, and I agree. I mean, I went for all shaped bottles. I went from little 6 or 8 ounces to a lot of 12s, and then some bombers, and then a few wine bottles. That way, you kind of had what part, how many people am I sharing this with? I can choose what size bottle I grab.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, I think that I've had a blast. This most of an hour has gone by in a hurry.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I love kind of talking on the homebrew side, and it's been a long time since I've had a chance to think of some of those old stories of when we were just trying to get it all up, as well as the home brewing thing. So it's really always fun. I'm a home brewer, and I've been a home brewer a long time, and I've been tried to be very supportive in the home brewing community. We have a great one here locally. We have these cobalt blue swing top bottles, and since we have many of them that get poured samples out and then we don't have a use for the bottle again, we have a deal with the local home brewers. You can have a dozen bottles, you just got to bring one back full. And so I love the home brewers. It's where I started, and it's where I always want to be.
Well, hopefully we can have you on again.
It'd be my pleasure.
Thanks, David.
Have a good day.
I want to thank David Myers again for taking time to talk to us. You can find links to the International Mead Festival and all the organizations that David mentioned in our conversation on basicbrewingradio.com. Well, next week I hope to talk to Chris Colby of Brew Your Own magazine about one of my favorite topics, pale ales. And in a couple of weeks, we'll continue our tasting of bad beers that we started last week. I thought we needed a couple of weeks of a palate cleansing in between those. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. I'm still getting feedback from those who have purchased the pre-release version of our all-grain DVD. I appreciate all the good comments and suggestions we've got so far, and from what I'm hearing, I think we're on the right track. I'm still offering the all-grain DVD in its pre-release form for a short time longer. I'm editing now for the final version, and we're getting the cover art done, so we're getting closer. So not much longer on the offer, but you can find out more at basicbrewing.com/grain. And if you're wanting to get into home brewing for the first time, while you're on our site, you can check out our DVD, Basic Brewing, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing. We'll walk you through the process step by step, and you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVD. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online, and I'll send you one myself. Well, that's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time. So long.